Do some examples of when I give you the name, how do I write the formula? So the first one they give me is zinc sulfite, and you can use the flowchart just like you did for naming. It's on the opposite side though, so just make sure it says formula rules and that'll help you out. So we're doing zinc sulfite. So is the first element a metal or non-metal? Well, that's a metal. If you don't know whether it's metal or non-metal, just look it up on your periodic table. You know, the non-metals, they're labeled right here in this section over here. And then also remember that hydrogen is a non-metal. Okay, so it says if we have a metal, we look up the charge of the metal. And if it's a transition, don't forget it's going to be given to you in parentheses. So for zinc, if you look up on the periodic table, it is a +2 charge right here. Okay, so then we move down here. Does the second ion end in ate, ite, or ide? And in our case, it's an ite, and that means we follow this way. And it says, look up the symbol and the charge of the polyatomic ion chart, which is on the back of the periodic table. So we're looking for sulfite. Remember, they're in alphabetical order. Sulfite's right here. So it's SO3 -2. So we have zinc +2 and SO3 -2. So remember, the positive one's always going to go first. And this tells us how many we have. Now, remember that we learned that if we have the same charge, we can cancel them out. So we're just going to do zinc with a 1 and then sulfite with a 1 as well. So let's start over with the next one. Now remember, they're in alphabetical order, so this kind of helps me out a little bit. So I know I'm going to have zinc, and I know that's a +2 charge. This time we're doing sulfates. So we have a metal, so we're going this way. We looked up the name and the charge just a little bit ago. Does the second element end in ate, ite, or ide? And the answer this time is 8. So we're going to go the same way. We're going to look it up on the polyatomic ion chart. And this time, sulfate is right here. That's SO4 -2. Okay, so our charges are the same this time. They cancel out again. So we have ZnSO4. I'm going to skip down a few because we know how to do zinc now. And remember, I put them in alphabetical order for you. So we have xenon trioxide. So the first thing we have to do is see if the first element is a metal or non-metal. So xenon is right here on the periodic table. So it is a non-metal. So we're going to go this way this time. Is the compound an acid? Does it start with H? The answer to that is no, it does not. Look up the symbol of each element. So xenon is Xe if you didn't know that. Trioxide, oxide is oxygen, so that's O. Then our next step in our flow chart is to use the prefixes to tell you the subscripts from each element. So the exception to the switching charges rule is this. When we have two nonmetals, we just use the prefixes they give us in the problem. They say xenon with no prefix, so that's 1. They say trioxide, so tri is 3. And if you don't remember the prefixes and what they mean, they're right here on the front of your periodic table. And that's it. So with the nonmetals, it's super duper easy. Let's try another one. Vanadium. So if you don't know it, let's look up the formula. So here is our mysterious vanadium. So the symbol is V. Notice they give us the charge in parentheses. So V stands for +5. So in the flow chart, this is what I did. Is the first element a metal or non-metal? It's a metal. I looked up the name of it and the charge, okay? And it was a transition metal, so the charge was in parentheses. Does the second ion have an ate, ite, or ide? In this case, it's an ide. So let's follow this way. So it's probably on the periodic table. The exceptions are cyanide, hydroxide, peroxide. Okay, but other than that, they're going to be on the periodic table. So we have oxide, which is oxygen. And then if we look up the charge of that, it's negative. So when we write this formula, we have to switch the charges. We're going to have V2, and we're going to have O5. I'm going to skip down again until we see an acid. So we have examples of all the different kinds. So this is what you have to be able to do on the quiz. You have to be able to name anything or write the formula for anything. And then there'll be some definitions and questions about some rules. But other than that, that's all the quiz is. Formula rules. Is the first element a metal or non-metal? Sulfurous is sulfur, so that would be a non-metal. So then it says, is the compound an acid? The answer to that is yes. Is the acid binary or oxy? So binary, bi means two, right? So you have hydrogen plus one other element. Oxy is hydrogen plus a polyatomic. Now, we're given the name here, so how do we figure that out? Well, binary is going to start with hydro, and oxy is not going to start with hydro. So, sulfurous acid is an oxy acid, and I know that because it does not start with hydro. So we go right here. So hydrogen charge is always 1, so you look up the symbol and the charge of the polyatomic ion. You have to remember what sulfurous means, because you could have sulfurous, but you could have sulfuric. Ik means 8, and us means ite. So by looking at this name, I know that number 1, it is a polyatomic ion, not an element from the periodic table, because it doesn't have hydro. Number 2, I know that the polyatomic ion that was used to make this is sulfite, because it has this us. If it was sulfuric acid, then that would have been sulfate. Our hydrogen is always +1. We need to look up sulfite if you don't know it. Sulfite would be SO3 -2. So we just crisscross those charges. So it'll be H2SO3. Let me do one more of those acids with you for the flow chart. So is the first element a metal or non-metal? We have sulfur, so that's a non-metal. Is the compound an acid? Yes. Is the acid binary or oxy? Well, it does not start with hydro, so it is oxy. So hydrogen charge is 1, and then sulfuric means sulfate, so it's SO4 -2. So your formula is going to be H2SO4. Okay, so at this point, your job is to practice, practice, practice as much as possible until you can do it in your sleep, basically. And then you should be ready to take the quiz.